Welcome. We made it here. It's Beyond the Box Score. Dan Schneier, Jacob Gibbs, and we have some really great guests lined up. And we're starting the show off with one of the best guests we could possibly find. I'm going to kick it to Jacob in a second to introduce him, but I need to give my own quick anecdote real quick. When I first was a child, 13-year-old boy, had no idea about anything, but I love football. My dad used to have me read one column every week. I think it was the only fantasy football column out there. It was The Talented Mr. Roto on Roto World. I'll never forget it. We used to read it together, and it was just an incredible part about my childhood. And it's what got me so addicted and so interested in this game that we all play and love, and this game that I've turned into a career. So I want to kick it to you, Jacob, because I know you've had a similar experience, but let's welcome on our guest.
Yeah, Dan, so you're gonna like this. So Matthew first became aware of me, not because of, my fantasy football tweets or anything like that, but because I created a Game of Thrones DFS game. You heard that right. I set prices for every character. I would score every episode. So like characters got points for kills and drinking alcohol and using curse words, lots of really wholesome stuff. That's how Matthew found me. He saw this ridiculous game that I created and quote retweeted. It was just a simple fantasy life. And that's just so perfect to me. Like, that is really why Matthew's work has always resonated with me personally, is like the gamification of everything, the gamification of life, just making life more fun. And so that's why we're here today to talk to Matthew about his most recent gaming venture. But before we do that, I also have Matthew Berry anecdotes to share, of course. So, so I told my parents that Matthew was joining us on the podcast. Super excited about it, of course. And my mom, first thing she said, she's like, "Isn't that the guy whose book you asked for?" I remember because it was the first time you asked for a book that was nonfiction. It was so just like fantasy life. Indeed, right there on the shelf next to Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and everything, we've got Matthew Berry's face. And then my dad chimes in and goes, "Matthew Berry, that's the guy that convinced us to draft Michael Vick our first year of fantasy. We got last place." And I just love that. That's so funny. Like the range of memories here. That is exactly how it goes in this industry doing this work. And that to me is like why it's so dang cool. I have so much respect for Matthew, for the goats that we have here at CBS, Dave, Adam, Dan, Jamie, Heath. These guys have been doing it for so long. They've stood the test of time. It's so easy to be wrong. And that's what people gravitate towards most of the time. I'm sure Matthew has heard that a million times about Vic or whoever else. People remember the misses, but like it's a crazy, chaotic game that we're trying to predict. And we get some right, we get some wrong. But these guys have stood the test of time, and really no one has stood the test of time and earned the respect of the fantasy community more than Matthew Berry. And so it's just like such an honor for you to be here, Matthew. Thank you so much. We are absolutely living the fantasy life. And so just like, yeah, first off, how are you doing this draft season? How is fantasy life treating you?
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Really kind. You guys are very generous in your introduction there to me. I'm just Jacob Droops very quickly. I would just tell your dad that, all due respect, Michael Vick was a top 8 fantasy quarterback that year on a points per game basis. He missed some time. He wasn't the number 1 overall pick, but it's not why you finished last. Okay, it wasn't. That's what's crazy about the Michael Vick thing is that like I've had much worse calls over my. I mean, I've been doing this over 20 years, right? So I've had some massive swings that were much worse than Vick, who just didn't. It was number 1 overall, and he again. By the way, he was a consensus first rounder that year by everyone. I had him number 1 overall, but he was a consensus first rounder, and and was fine. He just wasn't, number 1 player in fantasy. But so I would push back on your father that that's the reason you guys got last. But the season's gone really, really well. To answer your question, we're fantasy life is going very well. Having a lot of fun over at NBC with Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Really excited about a lot of the announcements we've made at Fantasy Life. And so I'm literally in the middle of, 8 zillion. I don't know if you guys have found this. I have, you always do slow drafts, but this year in particular, maybe it's because of guillotine leagues and whatever, I'm literally on the clock as we speak. I am on the clock in like 6 different leagues. Like I'm doing more slow drafts this year than I think ever before because of my schedule and just because of everyone else's schedule. And it's just, it's chaotic, but yes, the 3 of us are all living that fantasy life.
And it's the same for us. We're in a lot of slow drafts right now, Matthew, and it's a lot of fun this time of year. And I really love the team you've built over there at Fantasy Life. I think the key is just like we're trying to do with Beyond the Box Score here, which is an extension of our Monday show. And now we're bringing it to Tuesday to Fantasy Football Express. The nerds. I mean, you guys have so many good fantasy football nerds on that staff, and they get into some of the information that really gives you an edge, in my mind, at least, for fantasy football. It's not the stuff that you're going to get everywhere. It's the stuff that you're going to get there at Fantasy Life and here, hopefully, at Beyond the Box Score and Fantasy Football today. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but also I want you to tell us about the Guillotine leagues that you're getting involved with.
Yeah, no, I absolutely will. I appreciate the that. Listen, yeah, I mean, like the team over at Fantasy Life. I'll just very quickly, and then we'll get into Guillotine leagues. But just very quickly, I appreciate you saying that. I think Dwayne and Ian, Peter Overzet, Kendall Valenzuela. You know, we just added Paul Charchian as well. Thor Nystrom. Like we really strong. You know. Rob Wozniak, Woz NFL, has been one of the most accurate rankers over the last 5 years in the NFL. And I feel like we have a nice mixture of like both, to your point, nerds, would say with love, like Dwayne, who really grinds the numbers, and his utilization report is among the most valuable insights in the entire industry. But also, we have people like Cooter Doodle, so we try to run the gamut. As well in terms of, nerding out, but also having fun while doing it. But the most important thing, I'll just say this, in terms of building Fantasy Life, and my CEO is a guy named Elliot Christ. And the first thing I said to him when we were building the company and who we were deciding who we wanted to try to go get and build around, and I said, I only have one rule. I said, obviously, we want them to be good. We want them to be insightful. We want everyone to offer something slightly different to the audience, but make people better players, better sports bettors, better fantasy players. We want them to do all that. I said, but my biggest rule, no assholes. Just literally like no assholes. Like I'm too
Matthew,
old.
We've got a family show here, Matthew.
You bleep me out. I assume it's taped, right? I assume it's taped. So you guys can bleep me out and people will figure out what I'm saying. But and that's to me that's the most important thing is that like Dwayne and Ian and Peter and Paul and Kendall and Cooter and just the entire team, Matthew Friedman, forget about Matthew Friedman for some reason. Friedman's amazing. The entire team, like they're all super smart and sharp, but they're also all really good people. And it's just been a wonderful team effort. To answer you about Guillotine leagues, here's my first question to you, Dan and Jacob. Have either of you ever played a Guillotine league?
First time this year.
Jacob all right. On his first time. I'm a Guillotine League veteran and a big proponent of Guillotine leagues.
Yeah. What do you enjoy about it, Dan?
What I love about them most is that I can use a different strategy than I can use in my regular fantasy leagues. And I play Guillotine leagues very, very aggressively. I use a lot of my budget early when a lot of people don't, while leaving so I'll leave 20% for end of season stuff, but I'll use it very wisely at the end of the season. Because what I notice about Guillotine leagues, you correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, in your experience, is that the best money to be spent is actually early, for me at least, because a lot of those big names hit the market early. Late in the year, budgets are depleted across the board, and you can get guys for much cheaper, and that money becomes a little less valuable, to me at least, because there's more available free agents.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it depends on obviously the team and the size of the league and everything like that. But let's reset here for people who are like, what the hell are Dan and Matthew talking about here? So if you've never heard of a Guillotine league, or if you've heard about it but you've never played it and you're wondering what's going on, maybe you're like Jacob and you're going to lose your Guillotine league virginity this year. Again, it's a family show. Sorry. But what I would say here, so here's what you do with a Guillotine league. You have a league like normal, okay? You draft a team like normal. The twist here is that you don't play head-to-head. You start a lineup as you normally would, but you're not playing head-to-head. You're just starting a lineup. At the end of the week, the team with the lowest score in the league gets cut. Chopped. Your season's over forever. You're just done. Somebody's going to be one and done. And you just keep doing that until only one team remains. Now, as Dan sort of hinted at, the other twist here is that all the players on the team that got cut go into the free agent pool. So it's like week 6 and like McCaffrey and Mahomes are on the waiver wire. And it's we'll talk about your strategy here in a second. But in essence, every team, you think about any fantasy league you're in, every team has star players on it. So as opposed to a typical waiver wire where you're going like, oh God, there's this slot receiver that got 3 targets last week, and maybe he's sort of interesting. Like you're going through the dregs of humanity there, trying to find scraps. Here you're like, oh, I could bid on Jamar Chase. I can bid on Devon Achane. Like it's crazy. The kind of free agents that you get week after week, and so it makes the waiver wire really exciting. In terms of strategy, and so you're right. Here, the big strategy, Jacob, and just since you'll be starting for the first time, sounds like Dan's a veteran. The key about it is unlike normal season-long fantasy football where you're drafting for upside, here you're drafting for floor. It doesn't matter if you finish first or second to last.
Yep.
You just need, right? Again, you don't need to outrun the tiger. You just need to outrun one other person and let the tiger get that person, right? That's all. So all you're trying to do is you're drafting for floor and you're drafting for consistency. And so somebody like Michael Pittman, who doesn't have a ton of upside, but like Michael Pittman's a great Guillotine League player because like every week he's just sort of like 7 for 80. Like he's just kind of like he doesn't really score touchdowns, but it's like 14, 15 points a week kind of thing. And so it's a different mindset in terms of how you do it. And so the other piece of it is that I really like about it, and then I'll shut up here. But the other piece that I really like about it is that you can put as many people in a league as there are weeks in a season. So If you do a league right now, you can go to guillotineleagues.com to try it out. If you can do a league, you can do an 18-person league. I mean, and you can also, by the way, do it at any point during the season. Again, because you're not playing head-to-head, you're not beholden to the NFL schedule. So when there's 4 weeks left in the NFL season, you could do a 5-person draft. All you need is one more person in the league than weeks left in the season. So you can start a league at any point during the NFL season. So that's a lot of fun as well. And it's literally one of these things. I've become obsessed with this format. Jacob, I've become so obsessed with it, I literally bought the company. Like, I like it so much, I bought the company. Fantasy Life acquired Guillotine Leagues, and the guy that founded Guillotine Leagues, Paul Charchian, the Fantasy Hall of Famer, has joined our staff, and he's come over and he's running Guillotine Leagues for us for Fantasy Life. But it's been great, and we've made the game 100% free, so you can again try it out. Do a shadow league. All the guys, you'd be amazed at what your strategy will be, how different it'll be when you play Guillotine League.
So cool. And the free part is cool too. I think that's something that really stands out about Fantasy Life to me is you guys have so many freaking free tools that are really, really good. Like I don't know if people realize that or not, but like go over to Fantasy Life and check out what they've got because they've got a lot of really, really helpful stuff. So the targeting floor is interesting to me, that philosophy. I almost thought like I would want to target upside more in terms of just finding a few key players that like give you massive, massive upside, and then like mix in early season players with that, with the idea that you're going to be supplementing your roster throughout the season. You're going to be churning the bottom of your bench with quality players. And so to build the best team possible, you would want to kind of get a few big swings in that could be like building blocks for your team. I'm curious what you two think about that because I'm a rookie.
Well, I guess it depends on what you define as upside, right? I mean, like, whatever. Garrett Wilson has tons of upside, but like there's a floor to Garrett Wilson.
Yep.
I mean, it's not like we're talking about
Jonathan Brooks.
Brooks is someone you wouldn't want to draft.
Absolutely not.
I know. Yeah. I think I would want those players because I think at some point, well, it depends on when the season would end, but at some point I think Brooks is going to be like a top 5, top 10 fantasy running back.
Jacob, I 1,000% agree. And if you draft him, I will enjoy picking him up on Waiver.
Right, exactly.
When you're dead. Like,
right.
There's no question that Brooks is going to be a factor in fantasy this year. But when you draft for Guillotine Leagues, you have to think in 3 to 4 week increments.
Yes.
Because there's so much turnover. And again, like look at bye weeks. Bye weeks become important. You want guys with later bye weeks, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I'll say, another key here is I think it's especially true in fantasy generally this year, but especially in Guillotine Leagues, I want an elite tight end.
Because I feel that way about quarterback. Yeah. I feel like I push quarterback so much further up than I usually do in Guillotine Leagues. So I want immediate scores.
You want immediate scores and you want that floor. Again, you're just like, I just need to make sure that I produce points because even the biggest stars, like in Guillotine League, give me Amon-Ra St. Brown over Jamar Chase all day, every day. Mm-hmm. Right? Again, like Do I think, and like if you go look at my ranks on RotoWorld, like I have Jamar Chase ranked ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously, because but my point is there's a a 3 for 37 day coming for Jamar Chase when they decide to double team him Bracken and Higgins has a big game and whatever. Chase Brown runs one off and there's a pick six and then you're dead. Whereas Amon-Ra St. Brown is like a bad day for him is 6 for 86 or whatever.
Right.
Like again. Yeah, it's just a total mindset there. And so what I would say there is right. You don't want people should I'm in these guillotine leagues and I see people drafting TJ Hawkinson. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So if it's a 10-team league, it's over at week 10.
If it's a 10-team league, it's over in week 11. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But the goal is to get to that full amount. Usually you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But by the way, when you're in an 18-team league or a 16-team league,
right.
like you're picking for scraps. But
yes,
the idea is again, there's going to be a lot of roster turnover. Every week there are legitimate starters that come into the free agent pool. And you have to sort of there's a lot of strategy and theory. And again, we have a ton of all free strategy and theory at fantasylife.com about this. We have rankings specifically for guillotine leagues at fantasylife.com. But like, the example I gave, right? Okay, it's week 6 and you're like, wow, McCaffrey, should I blow all my budget? And Dan, so this is your point, right? And so there's one hand you think about that, but on the other hand, like again, and I'm making this up because I actually haven't memorized when the Niners bye week ends, but like you're like, oh, I'd love to have McCaffrey, but his bye's coming up in like week 8, so that's going to be a week where I don't have him. And then by the time we get to week 12, I'm looking at my league, and there's only going to be 5 teams left in week 12. And by the way, when there's 5 teams left, every team's a super team. And the advantage I get from Chris McCaffrey in a 12, 14, 16 team league is not nearly as great as it is in a 5-person league where every team's a superstar team. So how much of my budget do I really want to bid on McCaffrey in week 6? And so there's all those machinations that you have to do. You can't think about because again, all you're trying to do is not be last. And so Dan, it depends on the league that I'm in, how aggressive I want to be. Sometimes I try to save it because I'm like, hey, you know what? I think I've got like the 12th best team here, but all right, there's 16. I think I'm okay. And you sort of look, and you also look week to week. I like all my matchups this week. I think I'm good. I'm going to save my money this week.
I was going to ask you a strategy question on that, but first I want to be clear about one thing we weren't clear about. It is a free agent budget league, so it's not something we clarified just yet. It's not rolling waivers. You have a budget. And I know our listeners are used to that in some of their regular fantasy leagues, but this is the only way to do it for Guillotine.
Yeah,
at least
you
in
do
my mind.
$1,000 free agent budget that's the last year of the season, but you can trade for or away money. And but once once waivers runs, once there's a free agent auction that week, then it's first come first serve. So you can do $0 bids. You can pick guys up if you run out of money, but it is money management becomes part of the experience. And it is, Jacob, you will see, it will change how you look at fantasy football because it is a sweat like you've never had. Like normal fantasy football, you're like, hey, you have a bad week. What are you going to do? But here, like, you already got a guy on a bye. One guy leaves the game early because of a hamstring injury. Another guy just has a bad game. And then you find yourself going like, oh, my God, if Josh Jacobs doesn't score a touchdown on Monday night, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like, what I mean? Like, it's like it's a sweat like you've never had. It's really, really fun. And, again, I discovered the game 2 years ago and fell in love with it so much I literally bought the company.
One final strategy question. I know you got to get out of here, Matthew. And we're really appreciative of your time. Do you look at week 1 matchups when you draft your team? Because that's something that I've always been curious about, if that's a correct or incorrect strategy.
I look at week 1 matchups only as a tiebreaker and only when you get in the middle. Like, for example, I was looking at here. I'm in a draft right now, and I needed another running back. I wanted like a 4th running back here, and so I was looking at Jerome Ford or Chuba Hubbard, and I'm just like, you know what, Jerome, like both guys are sort of, and I went with Chuba Hubbard just because like both guys are sort of like short-term starters until Chubb comes back or Brooks comes back, right? But I'm just like, do I really want to? I'm nervous about the Cowboys week 1. Like, do I really want to? And we're already seeing some Deontay Foreman there as well, so I sort of feel like Chuba Hubbard's going to, while not as good an offense, and probably not as good a player, but I feel like he'll get more volume, and I feel safer with Chuba Hubbard than I do with Jerome Ford in week 1. So what I will do is I'll look at the first couple of weeks in terms of drafting. Like, I don't want somebody that's got a week 5 bye.
Right.
In an ideal world, that kind of thing.
J.K. Dobbins is the guy who stood out to me on that like same note. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to make a bet on Dobbins, like, he might have the role. Everything that has been coming out of Chargers camp has been really good, and so like week 1 is the time to do it. Assuming
before he.
But Jacob, again, like, there's such a narrow margin for error. Like, the Chargers scare the hell out of me because I agree with you. Dobbins is a great
maybe in a deeper league,
as is Gus Edwards. I think both guys are actually going to get enough volume here. I think Josh Palmer is interesting, right? Everyone's so obsessed with McConkey, and I get that, but Josh Palmer is likely the number 1 target for Justin Herbert. Having said that, we just don't know what this offense looks like, and that's going to make me super nervous in week 1 when I get, like, you don't want to be the first guy out, right? So again, like, you have to think about all this again. It's a different way to think about it. It's a really fun challenge, and it's not trying to replace your normal season-long league that you love, but I just like because you can do random people, grab 5 people at your office, grab 6 and do a 7-person league, whatever. Just try it out, or even take your normal 12-team home league and say, hey guys, we all want to try this as well, because it's a different, it's completely different, and wait to see the group chat blow up.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And what I love about it most is that I've done it now for 3 years, and on Guillotine leagues as well, because my cousin runs one. And what I love about it most is, unlike my snake drafts and my home league auctions, I still am learning new things each year from a strategic standpoint about what I pick up on in drafts, what I pick up on during the season, what I want to do for my next Guillotine league the year after. And that's not something you can say, in my opinion, at least, about redraft at this point. We've kind of been through a lot of that. So I think that's the best part. It's just something new and unique. Matthew, so much. Thank you so much, I say, for giving us your time today and talking to us a little bit about fantasy life and about Guillotine leagues. And anything else you want to shout out before you go?
No, I appreciate it. Listen, we've made, since Fantasy Life has acquired Guillotine Leagues, we've tried to upgrade the site. We're upgrading the tech. We're adding new features. We've redesigned it. More changes are coming throughout the year, which is really exciting. We have a new feature this year called Optimal Lineup, which means basically, like, you turn that on, so it's kind of a best ball hybrid, which is, so you don't have to decide, like, it's basically, it's going to be best ball scoring, but then there's still a team that's chopped, and you're still then doing the waiver wire system. But this way you don't have to sit there and go, like, well, you draft J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and you're trying to guess which Charger running back you want in week 1.
I like that.
So there's a little less maintenance there, and we have more features coming as well. But listen, I'm easy to find on Twitter at Matthew Berry TMR. I'm at Matthew Berry TMR on all forms of social media. Jacob, after you try it out, I would love any feedback you have. Dan, any ideas you have. But anyone listening, if there's, hey, I'd love to see this feature, I'd love to see this wrinkle, send it to me, send it to @PaulCharchian as well, because we're going to be iterating throughout the year, and we're putting a lot of resources into it, and we're really excited about it. So would love anyone's feedback.
Awesome stuff, Matthew. That's Matthew Berry. Thank you so much again for taking your time. And everybody, check out Guillotine Leagues. You're gonna have a lot of fun. I promise you that.
Thanks, guys.
All right, next up, we are bringing on a few more members of Fantasy Life who are joining us in a second, and I'm really excited about that because, look, at the core of Beyond the Box Score, when we started the show, Jacob, myself, and Adam, we had 2 things in mind. Let's try to blend film analysis with advanced stats and analytics analysis, and we've got 2 guys on here I think do that better than almost anybody, if not anybody, in the industry. So let's welcome them both on right now, and here they are coming right up. Yes, sir, it's Dwain McFarland. And with the free Duke Johnson tag, not even shouting on his Twitter, he just wants to put out what's more important than his Twitter handle. And it's Ian Hartitz. And I hope I pronounced that last name right, because I'm not positive.
It's like Cheez-Its, but Hartitz. You got close enough, man. It's all good. But yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. And yeah, Duke Johnson, a little too free for my liking. But whenever I get the chance to shout out the U's all-time leading rusher, can't pass up the opportunity.
Yeah, I have to say, before Ian and I came on to Fantasy Life, I came on first, Ian came on later. We had talked about just starting our own thing together, and it was going to be McFartitz. So I think Fantasy Life sounds a lot better than McFartitz. So
yeah, the Fantasy Life boys are doing their best here today to kind of blend this show from a family show to a little bit of something else. But we're loving it here. It's Beyond the Box Score. We tend to take it a little bit further ourselves. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about kind of your preparation for the season, where we're at as we're heading into year one and what people can look out from you two from you two in week one. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the Sheesh report with you, Ian, and kind of give the FFT listeners who might not know about it a little bit of an insight into what that is.
Yeah, so as we all watch football on any given Sunday, there are certainly a lot of tilting moments out there to digest, both as real life fans and obviously as fantasy managers that you might not pick up if you're just scanning the box score. And I do think there are times where we can just kind of tilt over the nullified touchdowns, over the wide receiver who broke wide open deep but didn't get a catchable pass, or the running back gets stopped at the 1 yard line, then has Taysom freaking Hill come in and vulture another touchdown. So all that stuff goes on, and I just, really wanted to try to avoid being that guy who looks at, oh my gosh, receiver only had 2 catches for 15 yards. He must have had a bad game, when in reality, it was all the quarterback's fault. So again, the Sheesh report, just trying to, again, really note those plays that kind of make you look at yourself and just say sheesh because it was unfortunate it happened, but also just to provide that extra, context that you get from watching the games when I might not necessarily see popping up in the box score. So yeah, every Sunday night when Dwayne and I get on the Fantasy Life podcast, guys can subscribe to that wherever you listen to your podcast. But yeah, when we get on those, going through the Sheesh stuff, going through the utilization, and as you guys kind of said at the top, trying to find that happy blend of film and what the numbers say.
Sheesh report is so good, dude. I love these guys because they find a niche to fill. I remember the first time I saw the Sheesh report, and I was like, this is brilliant. Where has this been? And it's so overlooked that there's stuff that happens every week. There's so much outside of particularly the wide receiver position's control. And people get mad about the final stat line. It's like, you have no idea what happened. There's so much context that is needed. And on that note, Dwayne, didn't your Twitter handle used to literally be Context Matters? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, it was Context Matters. I remember when I first changed that and people were like, it freaked everybody out. And they were like, weren't sure if they were following the right person. I think back then I had 13 followers though. So it was didn't really confuse that many people. But yeah, it's all about real, understanding what is the player's role in the offense. It's obviously utilization is also telling you about talent, because you guys probably talk about this all the time. Wide receivers, targets are earned. You can scheme up stuff, every so often. You can pad some stats with scheme, but a guy's got to be out there, got to be able to go out there, beat the player across from them. They got to be on the same page with their quarterback. They got to be reading the coverage the same way. And then those are all the things that come into not just the physical attributes, but all that together means, hey, you're open on a play, a quarterback's going to be looking for you. So talent, obviously still a part of utilization, but yeah, just trying to better understand the fullness, if you will, of these players' roles. And it's really helpful with running backs because we start to figure out who's getting the carries inside the 5, who's getting the 2-minute offense whenever the team goes into, a true hurry up because the defense is playing a shell. And all of a sudden, Austin Eckler goes from having 7 fantasy points back in the day, and you look down, you're like, man, it's almost the end of the game, and I got 7 points from Austin Eckler. And then you look up and you have 18. Why he caught 6 balls, for 50 yards on the final drive, and maybe he scored a touchdown, and suddenly you got 25 fantasy points. So it's trying to understand what roles matter the most for these positions and what stats matter the most, and then put those all together, and you get the utilization report. And we'll have an upgrade for you guys this year early in the season. Not for sure yet if it's going to be week 1, week 2, somewhere in there, but we're going to have a utilization score that's based off of all these historical things. I went back and tested it, looking at it year over year, looking at it rolling 4 weeks, looking at it week over week, trying to find the most steady metrics that also mattered. And because some people don't want, believe it or not, guys, some people don't want all the nerdy stuff. They're like, just give me one number. Like Dwayne, stop making me look at I don't care about short yardage carries. I just want to know which running back has a role that's most likely to equal more fantasy points in the future, and I should go trade for him.
I always say, Dwayne, that past fantasy success is not the best predictor of future fantasy success, but past utilization is. So in a moment, I want to get just the lowdown, and you touched on it a lot there, but just a recap for maybe any of our listeners who haven't heard it, what the utilization report is. And then I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you for players that you think could be surprised. I don't want to say just players that your utilization after week 1, we might look back and be like, oh, why did we draft him here? Or why didn't we draft him here? But before we get into that, I want to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors.
America's Service Academies kick off their seasons right here on CBS Sports Network.
All right, let's get into it right now with you, Dwayne. I want to hear about the utilization report in its totality, and then I'm going to put you on the spot. I want to hear about players that are going to piss people off or make people really happy after week 1.
Yeah, so there's really not like a lot else to say about the
Okay.
utilization report other than like you have it for all the positions. Like you got wide receiver, you got tight end. Sorry, I'm a maniac. I was just finishing up a best ball mania right there. Had me on the clock as your ad was perfectly timed to let me make my last pick.
Awesome.
So looking at the utilization report, it's for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So you can go in, you can look at each position, and it's all like the utilization score is set to obviously parameters for each position and the ones that matter the most. But as far as the preseason goes and what we've seen, just a couple of quick things. Like I've got utilization data out on all these players in the preseason. I've been doing full write-ups, going and watching the film, and then also looking. It's kind of nice, guys. We just got to watch the starters for the most part. There's a few backups I watch, but I don't have to watch the whole game. I just watch like the first, usually 2 or 3 drives of a game. And there's some games where we don't have to watch anyone. And then I'm looking at the data with that. And then I put together these reports so folks can check it out over at fantasylife.com. If you're just a summary person, I've got summaries for each week, right? Here are the top 10 takeaways from this week in preseason. But if you're like, a diehard and you want to know every little thing about every team, I have full team write-ups for every week in the preseason. And what I'll say is I had a thread about this a while back. And then Jacob, you kind of did something similar too. Like you went back and you looked at some of the preseason stuff. And here's what I'll say, like directionally, looking at players that played with the starting quarterback for the most part is a good indicator of who's going to have the roles in week 1. Now, it's not always right. Now, the thing is, those players then actually have to go out early in the season and do well. They have to go out and actually, perform for their team. So a great example last year that the preseason told us, and then it ended up not going right, for example, is Elijah Moore. He was moving all over the formation for the Browns. We saw him with Deshaun Watson getting all these targets. He had this behind the line of scrimmage role. I mean, we were being careful. We weren't going overboard and saying, it's Deebo. He's not Deebo Samuel, but they were using him like Deebo Samuel. Well, guess what? Those first 4 games while Deshaun Watson, I believe it was 4 games, but when Deshaun Watson was still the starting quarterback before he hurt his shoulder, it was Elijah Moore was out targeting Amari Cooper. But the problem was he was doing jack squat with it. So the team was like, okay, we've been doing this for a month and we're going to go the other way. So things can still change. The best thing you can say for preseason, it's going to give you a shot early in the year to find out quickly if you're going to be right or not on some of these players. But that doesn't mean you should push them all to the top of your draft board. For example, like there are still guys right now that might be buried on a depth chart, or you don't know for sure what's going to happen with them. And they can still be better picks than guys that may look like they're in a better role to start the season based on preseason utilization.
Dontavian Wicks.
Yes, exactly. That's a great example. Kamani Vidal's another one. Like we just saw, news just broke that Isaiah Spiller's cut. So I'm assuming Vidal has made this roster. He rested in week 3 with the preseason players. We have J.K. Dobbins. Love your call out on that one earlier, Jacob. I was listening. I heard you.
I give 2 call outs. Matthew poo-poo both of them. I'm like, all right.
Well, Matthew's in a guillotine league. He poo-pooed it. But if you're playing best ball or a managed normal league, I'm with you. I moved J.K. Dobbins ahead of Gus Edwards. But if you look at Vidal, he's probably not going to have much of a role in week 1. But does that mean like he can't be something that you really like later in the season if that's what you need on your roster?
Yeah. That sounds right to me. Ian, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the players we might see. Or let's think about it like this. You have your Sheesh report, and I'm going to ask you to look into the future a little bit. Predict a few players that are going to make that and that are going to shock people, or that's just going to stand out to people after week 1.
Yeah, Dwayne and I on the Fantasy Life show were actually going through some of the leaders last year in terms of, again, getting stuffed at the 1-yard line and then not scoring a touchdown on the same drive. And number 1 was actually Joe Mixon. I know a lot of people would have assumed it was DeAndre Swift, and he was number 2. So very much, right up there as well. But with Mixon, man, I mean, now, like, how hot can this guy freaking run with some of the offenses he gets to be a part of? Because when you look at it, he hasn't been very efficient. But, I do think one of the bigger, fallacies in like fantasy football analysis is we put too much weight behind that yards per carry number, because Kamara, Mixon, ETN, Saquon Barkley, none of these guys averaged over 4 yards per carry last year, and it didn't freaking matter because they had all the utilization that you could ask for in Dwayne's utilization report, and guess what? It outweighed the inefficient measures. So guys like Joe Mixon continuing to get all those, fantasy-friendly goal line opportunities, even if they aren't making the most out of them. Again, 9 times out of 10, we just want to chase that volume because it will eventually, hopefully, lead us to the promised land. But I'll be very interested to see how it kind of goes for Saquon Barkley. He's one of these guys guys where, I think he's been a pretty common fade target when you kind of read, some of the quote unquote smarter analysts, just fade columns out there. And on the one hand, I get it because, you look at Eagles running backs over these last 3 years with Jalen Hurts, we have seen Eagles running backs ranked 30th in carries from the 1 yard line, but first between the 2 and 5 yard lines. So
Yes.
it's a run first offense. And man, if Saquon Barkley can just literally be 3 feet better than what DeAndre Swift was for most of last year, I mean, he's going to have an opportunity to potentially boom and give us some of that early career production. So Saquon, these last couple of years, really after that 2020, devastating injury, haven't seen, the same sort of just world beater that I think we had at Penn State and then his first 2 seasons in the NFL, but certainly got paid a pretty penny. And Dwayne and I, we keep going back and forth and trying not to use this example every time. But with someone like Saquon, it's one of those things where I do wonder if we could be sitting here on Sunday night. I guess they're playing on Friday. So maybe we're sitting there Saturday morning and it's like, oh, Saquon just racked up, 25 combined carries and targets on the freaking Eagles offense. Why are we overthinking this guy in the
Right.
place? I think his ability to really cash in on those carries inside the 5 yard line going to go a long way in deciding that. So only other point I'll bring up is unrealized air yards. Dunked on for everyone gets dunked on when you're in the Twitter streets long enough, but it was pretty funny just bringing up this yards, and it is a family friendly show. But someone just quote tweeted me and was like, unrealized air yards, how many unrealized female dogs, if you see what I'm saying, you able to get out here, bruh. So fair play to him. But truly, again, anytime we can just quantify what we're seeing out there on the field helps. And last year, DeAndre Hopkins, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley, and Garrett Wilson, the only 5 wide receivers with over 1,000 unrealized air yards, which is literally just measuring the amount of yardage gained on incomplete passes, targeting a specific receiver. So, hey, in Garrett Wilson's case, we got freaking Aaron Rodgers
right
center now. And even if he is 80% of his former self, I mean, Dwayne, I think your quote this morning was 80% of, Aaron Rodgers is still 1,000,000% better than Zach Wilson and what he's bringing to the table. So with Garrett, it's like, awesome. Okay, we can get behind that and everything. But at the same time, Hopkins, Olave, Devontae Adams, and, arguably Calvin Ridley, maybe not dealing with the best quarterback situations to necessarily improve that number. So that's one of those things where, again, we can track this stuff, but then it's about making that ever important, okay, is it actually going to change in their favor? So Eagles running backs, and again, some of these guys like your Olaves and Calvin Ridleys of the world who can separate, but sadly maybe don't have the best quarterbacks to still make it happen. Those are situations I'll really be monitoring here in just one short week.
Brian Thomas Jr. in the new Calvin Ridley role. A little bit worried about that we're going to have a lot of unrealized air yards. Hopefully he can come down with it, though, because he's so good. Ian didn't realize it there, but he was actually talking directly to me because I have been battling people online about Joe Mixon and Saquon Barkley way more than I should. And I can just feel it. I can just feel it coming. They're both going to have 15 touchdowns this year. They're going to get those instead of falling down to the one they're in. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like week 1, Saquon, he's got the highlight Friday night game, and he's just going to go for like 30 fantasy points. It's like 100 people in my mentions telling me. Okay, so I wanted to ask you guys, it's just kind of a fun exercise I did on Twitter. Looking forward to week 1, I want to think about players whose perceived fantasy value could really skyrocket with a big performance in week 1. Guys who are maybe kind of like ambiguous value right now. We don't know exactly what to think of them, but like a huge showing in week 1. But I'll bring up Brian Thomas Jr. as a perfect example here. He's got Miami in week 1, probably going to be a shootout, a bit of a depleted defense. If he goes and, has 100 yards, gets some deep catches, gets in the end zone, like all this mania that's been leading up all preseason is just going to boil over the top. Malik Neighbors comes out and has 14 targets and a 35% target share in week 1. We're going to lose our minds. So be thinking about this. I've got a few other names, but I'm just curious if anyone comes to mind for you, like right away where their value could swing in a big way. I think Chase Brown is a really obvious example. Zach Moss hasn't been practicing. The game script sets up really well where Cincinnati could just be destroying the Patriots and running a lot. It's not a good matchup, obviously, but we could see 20 carries for Chase Brown in week 1. That wouldn't shock me. The Dallas backfield, of course.
Yeah. I think one way to think about it, and Ian always does a really good job of framing this up, because like we're projecting for a whole season and we're ranking, but one thing he'll always say is, but Dwayne, where are you ranking in week 1?
Right.
And so the ambiguous situations you talk about, those are obviously candidates, right? For someone's going to come out of some of those backfields that we're not going to anticipate. And we're going to be like, whoa, J.K. Dobbins was another great example. But there are also players that we already know what their role is. And all of a sudden you're going to have to rank them for week one, which like I'm working on my week one rankings right now. And Joe Mixon's a great example. Like once you start ranking running backs for week one, Joe Mixon's like probably in your top 8 or 9.
Yes.
You know, I mean, he might be in your top 6 and you're like, oh man, like this guy goes in round. I just got him in round 6 of an underdog draft. I finished, you know, coming onto the show. And I'm like, okay, like it's going to be one of those things where I get it. We're taking all the wide receivers in front of them. I know that they've got issues with their age and all those things, but Ian, it's a great question anytime he asks, but yeah, Dwayne, where are you ranking them for week one? And again, there's more to that to handling season long rankings, but it's still a really good question. So there's players like that I think about, like Derrick Henry. Like right now, you're getting a little bit. It depends on where you're drafting. Derrick Henry might go round 2, round 3. You've got Joe Mixon, you know, as another one of those. Kenneth Walker. Oh my goodness! Like it sounds more and more we hear. Sounds like he's probably got that backfield, but there's just enough concern that he's a round 4 or 5 pick, even in home leagues where people are still nuts about running backs and they take a lot of running backs. You know, can take them too early. James Conner. Conner's the one Ian always Dwayne, but where are you ranking in week one? I'm like, you're right. He's going to probably be in like my top 10. Like I don't not have James Conner there. So a lot of it does come back to the running backs, but the ambiguous situations where we don't know for sure, Rico Dowdle, Ezekiel Elliott, that's going to be one. You already mentioned Chase Brown, Zach Moss. And then I would think like at the wide receiver stuff, it's all the young players. It's all the rookies. You already mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. Another one could be JSN, a year 2 player. We know Tyler Lockett been having issues getting on the field. He's fading fast. Like Tyler Lockett is fading more than like a pair of 1980s denim jeans. Like it's just like downhill for Tyler Lockett.
So you just know he's going to finish as like a top 24 receiver.
Yeah, probably. That's what I meant. My whole point to that was Tyler Lockett was going to be a top 18 wide receiver. Yeah. So there's a lot. Xavier Worthy right now in home leagues, you're still getting this guy in round 7 or 8. I'll be honest. Like you could probably reset the clock after week 1. And my guess is he would be a round 3 or 4 pick. By the time week 1's over.
That's hot. What about Devontae Smith? We see him come out and he's got the Kellen Moore pre-snap role that we're like speculating on. And it's like, man, Keenan Allen was number 1. And part of that was the injuries in LA, but number 1 in expected fantasy points last year in that role. CeeDee Lamb the year before, number 1. People are going to lose their minds about that. I think Kyron Williams, if Corum's not involved in week 1 and Kyron just comes out and has like 30 fantasy points, it's like, oh yeah, this guy was number 2.
That's happening, by the way. That's just happening. And everybody's going to realize it.
Right.
And then they're just going to, and then everybody's going to be, but he's going to get hurt. That'll be what everybody's going to say. But wait, he can't hang. And it'll be week 8 and he won't be hurt yet. And it's going to be like, well, okay, just take an L on Kyron.
You mentioned the Eagles pre-snap shift in motion. I will be curious what we get out of Washington, out of some of these other kind of newer look offenses. Because I had the whole, Washington Commanders beat screaming at me when I pointed out that Terry McLaurin wasn't moving outside the left wide receiver outside spot. Washington ranking dead last in pre-snap shift in motion. Not using much play action. It looked identical to all the things we hated about the Kingsbury experience in
Don't
Arizona.
get us started,
and guys. I don't know. Maybe, a 6-month trip to Thailand and then 1 year serving as the USC, co-offensive coordinator. Maybe didn't change his entire, philosophy with it. So
the literal worst year of Caleb's life as a football player.
Right?
Caleb's life was when Cliff Kingsbury kind of had his influence. And I'm with you on that one. Like Jacob said, don't get us started. We're not Kingsbury fans on the show.
I looked at the percentage of pre-snap motions for starting quarterbacks when they're on the field this preseason, and it's relatively low compared to the regular season. The lowest is like 30%. Jaden's was 3%. It's so silly, man.
But guys, have you considered it's just the preseason? Because that's what I keep hearing. It's like no one ever. So again, it is just the preseason.
It is. And coaches are not going to show off their scheme in the preseason. That's one thing that I do.
All the coaches are different.
Right.
The thing. Like some of them are doing some of it and others are not. But like
Gibbs, the Raiders.
I'm also panicking it right now on Clint Kubiak. Like, can we just see a little bit, like, all the play action, all the motion? Now we are seeing the 2 wide receiver sets more often, for the Saints, but I'm like, man, I've got some Olave bags that needs some that needs some good news.
This is a really small sample size, but when Carr was on the field, their pre-snap motion rate was 67%, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
But it was like 10 dropbacks or something.
Cincy's is up there, but that's one of the things where, like, you look at the leaders from last year: Miami, Kansas City, San Francisco. You know, these teams are still number one in the preseason. I find it hard to believe that teams are going out there and practicing all this stuff, and then when the preseason comes, they are purposely just trying to do the exact opposite of what they've been practicing every week. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, so far, I mean, we've talked about this. How much of the offense is going to be Kellen Moore, and how much of it is Nick Sirianni still trying to do what he wants to do? Because that has been, and I'm with you, I do think the Eagles have too much talent to completely fall off. But let's face it, that team and that offense looked pretty freaking broken during the final 2 months of last year. And at least in terms of a personnel standpoint, I mean, I'm not so sure they were just simply Saquon Barkley away from all of a sudden becoming this top 5 group again. So, man, if we see the Eagles go out there in week 1, underwhelmed, still look a little bit disjointed, going to be some fire alarms going off in the fantasy community.
I will say, if I'm putting anybody in motion in that offense, as much as I love Devonta Smith, I'm putting freaking AJ Brown in motion. I'm using him like the damn cheetah. I'm moving him all over, got him full speed. Like, he's just the guy that's going to be able to do so much more with it than what Devonta does once you get the ball in his hands. But I have a feeling they're going to do it for both guys. I think both guys are going to get a boost. I do trust Kellen Moore to get those things in a line, you know, once the season starts, or at least my fantasy bags do. Because it's probably an offense I'm not more in on. Maybe the Chiefs, but the Eagles are probably my second most drafted offense.
To the AJ Brown Devonta point, I've got one more thing, and then I've got 2 more names to bring up to the question that I posed, and then we probably do need to move on because we could literally just like get in the weeds deeper and deeper and deeper. AJ Brown, I think this will shock you, Dwayne. AJ Brown is number 1 in yards per out run over the past 3 years when isolated as the outside receiver, ahead of Tyreek Hill. And like,
well, that's just because he's a badass wherever you line him up.
He's so good.
Just put him in motion though, like you do Cheetah, and just let him do his thing.
No one beats Tyreek in yard per out run anything. That just shocked me. Okay, so 2 more guys to Ian's point about like new play callers and how we could see some fun wrinkles in week 1. That might really boost their fantasy value. I think Calvin Ridley, we've seen him used. He's actually running like horizontally to the line of scrimmage at times, which literally never happened last year. Being used in pre-snap motion a little bit. I think I don't know what to think of that offense. I'm worried that it might not work, but we could see Ridley come out with a big week 1, and then it's like, oh, we're back. We're so back. The other guy, this is really off the wall here. Darnell Mooney, if we see him come out and like be used in kind of the Tutu Atwell early stuff with the Rams last year, it's the same play caller coming over from the Rams. Not necessarily the same play caller. I think that was mostly McVay, but learn from McVay. And if we see him using Mooney in that way to free up, press releases for Mooney, I think that could be really interesting as well. And somebody that people have kind of forgotten about, but then would be willing to get back in. There was actually a pretty big Darnell Mooney hive back in the day.
Yeah, with Mooney, that's the kind of scheme that he needs. And people do forget, like, he was decent for where he was drafted, and they gave him some money. I think the challenge for him is, like, he would need one of Kyle Pitts or Drake London to kind of fail, like, to really unlock everything. And then I do agree. I like your call out on the Titans, because I wasn't very bullish, just because Callahan comes from a scheme where really, like, they use motion, but not at the snap. And so whenever you really, like, honestly, Zach Taylor is one of the worst coordinators in the league. He just lives on Joe Burrow, and he lives on them having the good weapons. He doesn't really do a lot to help them, but it does seem like Callahan is trying to do some things this preseason that, to your point, are a little bit more encouraging. And we have to always be careful when a guy's just now getting the chance to run their own offense, and they've been under another, play caller, or they've been just under another coach that does, have an influence, right, on what you're thinking of them whenever they leave the team. So a guy like Callahan, like, it wouldn't surprise me, like, if he actually is a better schemer than what we saw from Zach Taylor, because Zach Taylor was still calling the shots. Like, I mean, basically Callahan just helps implement the game plan every week and runs all the meetings and stuff and just gets everything set up. But once it came to game day, like, Zach Taylor still was getting the final say on everything and doing the play calling.
Ridley's one of those guys too, where it's always kind of frustrating when, people are looking at the bad box score and stuff, and you got to explain, look, I know it didn't work out, but you know how good you have to be to drop a touchdown in the National Football League. It's like the whole Will Fuller thing from a couple years ago. So Ridley, I mean, I get last year wasn't what we were hoping for, especially with how high he was going at the end of those drafts, but dude still had over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Titans have 92 million reasons to feature him to feed him the football. I know after last year, Dwayne, after that week 1 game where he did have over 100, had like 10 targets or so. I mean, if we get a similar one to that, I mean, all of a sudden that wide receiver price tag is going to be looking pretty affordable on a Titans team that could find themselves in some fantasy-friendly shootouts.
Just need Will Levis to be good. Which is asking quite a bit if you went back and watched all the film. But
when you put it that way,
we'll just leave it there. He could be like, he's looked good this preseason. I've just learned not to over analyze preseason quarterback play. It's just you fall into things like Kenny Pickett.
Yeah,
you can't go there.
But I think your point is an excellent one, especially when it comes to not making sure we don't just assume the coordinator coming from the head coach that he coordinated under is going to bring the same offense. Because to me, the Bengals, I agree with you overall about that scheme, but what's really stood out to me is just how bad the run scheme has been with Cincinnati. It's one of the reasons I'm very high on Joe Mixon this year. I think him going under center, going with a quarterback under center and outside zone scheme, people are going to be like, oh my God, Joe Mixon can run like this. And that's just been my opinion of the Cincinnati Bengals run game since he took over there. But like on that note, I want to talk with you about players. I want to switch the topic a little bit. I want to talk about players that might surprise. Something fantasy managers are really interested in. Like, who can I get in my drafts after pick 100 that might end up being valuable players to my roster after week 1? And Dwayne, I asked you this question earlier. You came up with 3 players. One of them, who was my wide receiver 4 in this draft class. I absolutely love this tape at Texas, and also learned very fast that I can't now be excited about the possibility of Quinn Ewers to the Giants, because Quinn Ewers, my God, does he have things to work on from a mechanic standpoint. But let's talk about A.D. Mitchell on the Colts, where Josh Downs might not be there week 1. He could hit the ground running. Deontay Johnson, who has been one of the best target earners in the NFL. No one's talking about this. Might be the number 1 with the quarterback who we literally loved on tape in college because of his anticipatory throwing on those out routes. And then Bucky Irving, who plays in a backfield that might give him more opportunity than we expect early on. So let's talk about those 3.
Yeah, so I'll rapid fire him, and Hartitz jump in here with anything you got, because he and I, we're like mind meld at this point. We talk so much every day. We draft teams together. We're on shows together. So yeah, I'll just start with A.D. Mitchell. I think the beauty of what you've seen this preseason is you've seen a player that they're already willing to move around the formation. He's really their outside wide receiver, but he's already grasping the offense enough to kick inside and play slot in the preseason. And how I'm still pretty sure that he's the outside wide receiver as well is when they go to their 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends and 2 wide receivers, he's kicking Alec Pierce off the field, and it's Mitchell that's getting out there. So everything that I look at in the utilization report, like when I mentioned when I mention these numbers, it's for the preseason with the starters. Typically that's with the quarterback on the field. Sometimes it might be the offensive line. If the second string quarterback started, it's all a little bit different. I explain it all in the article, but looking at Mitchell, man, 86% route participation. He had a 22% targets per route run. Jacob had a great thread on him, just showing off the speed, and just the raw ability. And I'm sure those are some of the things that really flashed to you, Dan, whenever you talked about him on tape. He was not a consistent player from a production standpoint, but man, he's definitely flashed the big ceiling. So seeing that he's already showing that versatility, and we know that he's playing outside when they go to the 2 wide receiver sets. It's funny because people will be like, man, this offense can't support, 3 playmakers. You're probably right. I don't think Anthony Richardson can. I've got Anthony Richardson projected for 3,400 passing yards. But here's the thing, guys. We shouldn't act like we're so certain that when Josh Downs returns that it's not going to be A.D. Mitchell as the wide receiver too. We really don't know. All you're looking for in those picks, once you get to, round 10, 11, and 12, you want upside talent that should get a chance to be on the field early in the season so you can make a decision. You've either found a gem and you're locking them into your lineup, or you're trading them for something better, or you're cutting them and moving on. The worst thing is when we roster these players, and it's still okay, but it's tough when you roster a player that you might not even play for 4 or 5 weeks. You know nothing about them. I would much prefer to really move up my ranks, upside players that I think I have a good shot to play in week 1. I'm going to jump to Deontay Johnson, but I feel like, honestly, Ian, I should just let you start. We both love Deontay Johnson, but if we had to say, I think you probably even love him a little bit more than me.
Dude, I mean, is getting constant separation a good thing, Dwayne? I mean, it's with the whole Deontay factor, everyone just loves to bring up the drops. Guess what? You've never heard the entire offseason, the fact that Puka Nacua had 4 more drops than any other wide receiver last year. And no one cared, because we shouldn't care, because all it is a freaking correlated factor of getting a lot of targets thrown your way. So with Deontay Johnson, I mean, he has a wide receiver 8 season to his name, and that was with post-elbow surgery Ben Roethlisberger. So I know we love giving, Terry Terry McLaurin and DJ Moore, that kind of this generation's Allen Robinson or Andre Johnson, just one horrible QB after another. But honestly, Deontay is right there with them, and through it all continues to get wide open. Per ESPN's, new advanced ratings, which I think are awesome. They're free. You can find them at, just Google ESPN advanced receiver ratings. But he actually does have the best open score of any wide receiver over these past 5 seasons since he entered the league. So with Deontay, now less target competition arguably than ever in this pretty wide open Panthers offense. And, we were talking earlier about guys who could just really boom up the ranks after week 1. What happens after we see Deontay getting 12 targets from an improved Bryce Young potentially out here?
Right.
So Dave Canales, quarterback whisperer, he's gotten the most out of Baker and Geno. Wouldn't it be the most shocking thing to see Bryce at least go from being literally the worst quarterback in the league to something a little bit closer to average? And if he does that, I do think his number 1 wide receiver will have a pretty nice season. So yeah, love that call. And to Dwayne's point, again, we want that upside. So the Deontay Johnsons of the world, the Bills wide receivers, another situation that, it's different, but it almost reminds me of the Dolphins backfield last year. We're like, we knew there was going to be production and we were just a little unsure about where it was going to go. Well, the second we do know, we're going to wish those guys were on our bench. So all 3 Bills wide receivers go and pick 118 or later on ESPN. And past that, guys, Dwayne, we did a draft last night where I think we had 5 wide receivers in the first 7 rounds or so. Didn't take another one until round 16, because really in those double-digit rounds, the handcuffed running backs are where you can be making a real nice bang for your buck. So Blake Corum, Tyler Algier, Ty Chandler, Antonio Gibson, Bucky Irving, as we brought up. Even someone that I know killed a lot of my teams last year, Tank Bigsby.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. Well done.
We're back.
Killed me too last year. I'm back on him.
Again, I always say it, guys, don't hate the player, hate the ADP. And when you get these running backs going late that are truly one injury away from being on the cover of every waiver wire article in the industry, those are the guys I want to be drafting late. Because to Dwayne's point, okay, they don't work out. You can cut them when you need to, but God forbid they do work out. Now we have a starter, not some wide receiver who we're never going to be able to predict when they have their big games anyway.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, sorry, go ahead.
Before we get to Bucky, I've just got one stat on Deontay. So you say, Ian, he's number 1 in ESPN's open score. First off, if you haven't heard of that stat, it is a pretty good stat. Next, behind Deontay is A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and he's number 1. The stat is, last year, even in Bryce Young's horrible year, worst quarterback in the league, he was 4th out of 24 qualifiers in Fantasy Points Data's accurate throw rate when throwing to an open receiver. It just happened never, literally probably 3 times. I don't know. But there was no one ever open. And now he has the most open player in the NFL.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
And look, hey guys, I know Dan, you were mentioning it. I know we need to probably move along, but Bryce Young did a lot of those things in Alabama, and he's a guy that's really good, honestly, at working the pocket and buying time for the scramble drill. He was actually known as a dual threat quarterback in high school, but he channeled that really into just getting, out of the pocket if he needed to and keeping his eyes downfield in college, which makes sense. He was surrounded by studs. Well, these are just massive upgrades whenever you come in and you add Deontay Johnson. Thielen's now your 3rd guy, potentially. I wasn't a huge Leggett fan, but at least they're trying with that. They at least tried to take Jonathan Mingo in round 2 last year, but getting Deontay Johnson's big. Jatavian Sanders, you got in the draft. Jonathan Brooks eventually be on the field. You had 2 guards. That's huge. Yes. You had Damian Lewis and you had Robert Hunt. You gave both of them big contracts. The guy had constant pressure right in his lap. So Bryce Young, it's funny when you mention him, people act like he's completely cooked. I disagree. I will not be surprised at all if he is like what Ian said, thought of as more as the middle of the pack quarterback after this season. And just finally, I'm Bucky Irving. I'll keep it super fast. But the main thing is Rachaad White has not been very good. Now, that doesn't always mean things. Coaches will keep giving inefficient running backs the ball all the time because there's things they care about that we can't see. But they have given Rachaad White a checklist this offseason, basically of, dude, don't run like Le'Veon Bell. Don't sit there and act like you're a punt returner and wait for everyone to close around you and then make one cut. They want them to get downhill. They want them to do it fast. What does Bucky Irving do? All those things that Rachaad White does not do. And then you heard about it in camp. He looked good. Now he's looked good in preseason. Now you got Chase Edmonds moving to IR. The runway's clear. I moved Bucky Irving inside my top 150 yesterday. I've got him right around 140 now in my ranks. One of my favorite running backs to take later in your drafts.
I love that call, Dwayne. And I actually hadn't had a chance to watch him yet this preseason. I finally got a chance to because Jacob put up his snaps on Twitter, and he looks bigger than I remembered him at college. I don't know if that makes any sense or if that's
he's
the
got
thing,
that dog in him. He plays
for
big.
me. He plays
and 192, if 192 is what people are going to throw at you, especially where he goes in drafts, like, okay, so then why are we taking Kyron Williams in round 3? Why are we taking Achane in round 2? Why are we taking Jahmyr Gibbs in round 2?
Well,
like, we're taking all those guys.
He's also
it reminds me of the
5'9".
Devontae Smith dialogue back in the day. Like, let's not focus in on this number of his weight that's going to fluctuate anyway throughout his career.
I mean, you look at it, I mean, his BMI, shout out player profiler, they include the BMI, the height, and kind of weight combined. And like Bucky Irving, 17th percentile, 28.4. That's not great. But Rachaad White, as a taller guy, like, yes, he's got a few more pounds on him, but he's almost skinnier. He's only the 30th percentile. So I'm with you. I don't think it's as big of a concern if the coaching staff doesn't let it be a concern, which throughout the whole preseason, you guys watch the carries, he's being used like an every down back.
I get the feeling we could sit here and chop it up about like 150 players, to be completely honest, talk analytics film all day, but that's all the time we have. We really do appreciate both of you coming on. And one more time, shout out where everyone can find your work and what you're doing over at Fantasy Life.
Yeah, you guys can go over to fantasylife.com. You can check out all of Ian's content. It's there for free. Mine. We've got other great content. You heard Matthew talking about our other great content creators. We've got Chris Allen. We've got Matthew Friedman. We've got Kendall Valenzuela. We've got Cooter Doodle. Cooter Doodle is so funny. We got Peter Overzet writing these newsletters. And so many other, I feel like I'm on an award show. So many others that we can't even name them all. We have so many awesome people, whether you're looking for funny stuff, whether you're looking for strategy content, whether you're just looking for, somebody like Ian, to tell you who's sheeshing and who's not. We've got it all. So we've also have a new premium product. I'm sure Matthew shouted it out, but we've got all of our rankings, our projections. We've got a draft simulator. If you guys want to practice, we've got all these different leagues set up in it. So you can get ready for your draft using those tools. I can't remember, Hartitz, how many tools have we added to the site? I think we've added 40 new tools to the site over this offseason. So we've been busy. We've been very busy.
Also, Fantasy Live show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 a.m. with your boy Dwayne.
There you go. So everyone knows where to find their work. Thank you so much again for joining us. We're going to take one more quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. Then Jake and I are going to come back on and give you a little preview of what to expect from this show during the season.
Yep, they're wrapping up the summer. And now we're looking forward to kicking it with superstars. Now that's CBS Sports Sunday. We'll see you on September 8th.
All right, in true Jacob and Dan fashion and true Beyond the Box Score fashion, this show went a little longer than we expected and hoped for our first one. We may not get to everything we planned for this show, but I do want to make sure we get to this one thing, Jacob. Let's give the listeners an idea of what to expect from this show and what we have planned already for this season.
Yeah, to me, obviously, me and Dan are going to bring the goods. It's Beyond the Box Score. Like, we're here doing our thing. You know that. But to me, really, like, what I'm so excited about this show is what you just listened to. Those guys are goats, man. Dwayne and Ian and Matthew Berry, like, they're so good. And some of you maybe haven't even heard of Dwayne or Ian before. Think about how crazy that is. They're working for Matthew Berry, the biggest fantasy football content creator of all time. He has over 1 million followers. And, like, that's what we're trying to do, is just kind of expand this thing, like get as many smart, hardworking, integrity people onto the show to share different perspectives and expose you to more and more people who can help you be better at fantasy, enjoy football, whatever it is. You'll find the people, you'll find the people that resonate with you. And like, yeah, that's just, I'm so excited. We've got Rich Rebar coming on in week 1 to help us prepare for everything that we can expect in week 1. Rich is my first choice to have come on and do that. He's the 101 to me. I don't know anybody who has as much attention to detail as Rich does. He does such fantastic work. And so, yeah, like that's just what the show is to me. We literally going to call it's super cheesy. Dan still hasn't approved it, but I love the idea of calling this segment when we have guests on Friends of FFT. It's a friendly show. It's good vibes. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, the good information as well.
And that's something Matthew mentioned during his segment when we had him on. The key for me has always been about fantasy. It's that there are plenty of people, guys and girls out there who can deliver good information to you, but you have to connect with listeners and people have to want to come hang out with you. And that's what the vibe we've been trying to go for since we started Beyond the Box. Or hopefully we've accomplished that. We're going to bring on a lot of like-minded people, Jacob, but we are running out of time for the first show. I do want to get in some rapid fire bold predictions from us though, real quick, if we can do it. No explanation. Let's just give a bold prediction. You can follow up with us on Twitter and we can go back and forth rapid fire. I got a few of mine queued up. Let me hear your first bold prediction.
You go first.
Okay, Caleb Williams breaks the Bears' all-time record, becomes the first 4,000-yard passer. In addition to eclipsing the 4,000-yard passing mark, he eclipses the 35 touchdown mark, 35, averaging over two per game, which also breaks the rookie record for passing touchdowns in a season.
I love that, man. I've been getting more and more concerned the more I dig into what Shane Waldron has done this preseason. It's been super, super boring,
Yeah, I'm worried about
which
Shane too.
has been a theme for him, but hopefully it's just preseason and he's about to unveil all of this cool stuff in the regular season because he's got so much at his disposal here. And yeah, Caleb looks incredible, man. You watch him and it's just like, yeah, this guy can do anything. We'll stay in the division. Jordan Love, MVP. Christian Watson leads the NFL in receiving touchdowns.
Wow.
Since he's entered the league, Christian Watson has accounted for 50% of the end zone targets when he's been on the field. That's higher than any player. I looked at every individual player and only filtered out the plays where they're on the field to see their percentage of this stat. And Watson still stands at the very top of that list. He's an absolute touchdown machine. You saw that his rookie year when he set the league on fire with Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love actually threw to him more when in scoring distance than Rodgers did. They just weren't quite as efficient. But I totally believe in Love. I think he's so good. I went back and watched as much Green Bay footage as I can and was just so impressed by him and impressed by Matt LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love, their connection together. Jordan Love's tape from the second half of the 23 season is up there with top 5 among all quarterbacks in the NFL. If he can carry that over, that's the big thing for me, because his first half of the year tape was just not the same. But of course, he's getting used to the players around him. And now he has so much talent around him. Another bold call I'm going to make is a 2-parter. Jacob, I've been hanging on to this one for 2.5 months now, and I'm just sticking with it. The first one is, and this one's gotten a little more, less bold because of the injury, but Cooper Kupp will outscore Puka Nacua this year. This is one that I've been on all year. I know it's one that you hate to hear, but let me just tell you something from my perspective. Cooper Kupp, the target share was still pretty good with Puka on the field last year. All the numbers were still pretty solid despite him playing injured the whole year. He's fully healthy now. I believe I'm not a big fan of predicting injuries. I never have been, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, he's going to get injured. And if we do that, we can go down a tricky path because Puka's injury history in college is not something that's so, glimmering, I should say. That's probably not even the right word. I'm not great with words in the spot, but that's part of me. And I'm just going to go with Kupp outscoring him. Look, he was the number 1 wide receiver 2 years ago, number 1 the year before, 1-2, one of the range, just had the triple crown. This dude is still unbelievable. Second parter is, I think we could look back, Jacob, on this fantasy season and be like, why the heck were we letting Travis Kelce fall to the middle, late third round, just because he was playing injured last year and the snap share went down, and just because the total scoring from fantasy went down because he scored 5 touchdowns versus 9, 10, 11, 12 in the 3 years before. I know there's some speculation they might try to save him, but let's see, because I think the middle of the field is going to be more open for Travis.
Wide open.
Than it's been since Tyreek Hill was there. These receivers are going to create space in the middle of the field for Travis Kelce to be the number 1 guy from Mahomes. Just be like, I'll take my 12. I'll take my 14. I'll take my 16. So I think we could look back and be like, why the heck were we letting Kelce fall?
Go watch the Xavier Worthy cut up that I put on Twitter and just notice the gravity that guy demands when he's working down the field. And that's just him. Marquise Brown isn't even on the field. Yeah, man, they really put Patrick Mahomes at 4. They put him at QB2. The players decided Tyreek Hill's our number 1, Lamar Jackson 3, Patrick Mahomes 4. He's about to set the league on fire.
You piss him off so much.
You do not there's like one thing you could do to motivate him at this point, and it's like, you did it. You did it. That's so crazy to me. You do not want petty Patrick Mahomes.
As long as those tackles hold up, Jacob, that's another. I'm going to do a quick one real quick. As long as those tackles hold up, Mahomes is my QB1 overall for the season. I think we're looking at 5,000 plus again, like he did in 2022, and potentially 40 to 45 touchdown passes.
I love it. Nico Collins, 2,000 receiving yards.
Whoa!
The dude is a cheat code. The ability to get open down the field, draw targets at a high rate down the field, a really unique rate for someone who's running such deep routes, and then also convert those into yards after the catch. I don't expect him to be quite as efficient as he was last year at creating yards after the catch, but that's because he was one of the absolute best over like the past 5 or 10 years. You look at avoided tackles, and it's like all running backs and Zay Flowers and people like that, and then Nico Collins is up there. What is it? That makes no sense. The guy is a freak. He's playing in what could be the best offense in the NFL. CJ Stroud could win MVP, and if he does, it's going to come through a massive passing total, and I think Nico's just going to be a huge part of that. And if either receiver gets hurt, then it's game over. Like we saw last year, he starts actually seeing like close to a 30% target share, and it's just like it's truly a cheat code.
Nico Collins was held back by scheme and quarterback play throughout his career at Michigan. He went to the Senior Bowl and was unguardable at the Senior Bowl. Similar story happened for Deebo Samuel. Similar story happened for Puka Nacua. And now that guy this year, according to Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl director, just to keep this in mind, listeners, we'll leave you on this note, is Luke McCaffrey. So if you're really looking deep for someone who could really be that next guy that was amazing and just didn't have the opportunity at the collegiate level or wasn't in the right scheme or didn't have the right quarterback play, maybe he's your guy. I'll leave you on that note. This has been Beyond the Box Score. This is our new show. We're really excited about it. Keep it locked and loaded. Please, if you want to help us grow, subscribe to us on Fantasy Football Today Express. Please give us a rating, a 5-star review if you enjoy us. This is what we need to get this thing kicked off, to get this thing going. It's all I'll ever ask. I'm going to start asking at the top of shows, not at the bottom, but this is our first show, and we're working out the kinks. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.